I know when that hotline bling, that can only mean one thing.
Ash and Zach are super smart. They went to college and learned a bunch of stuff. And Bo and Andrew didn't go to college because that's just the way life goes sometimes. What happens when you put them together and you try to make them learn? Grab your friends, let's listen together on Get Dumped on an Info Dump podcast.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Oh.
I changed it up on you guys.
Yeah, it was weird. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Get Dumped On, the Info Dump podcast.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, baby. My name is Andrew. How are you? I hope you're talking back to your stereo and or headphones right now, even though I can't.
We can hear you.
Yeah.
This is live.
So it's just the person who's listening, tell me how you're doing right now. That bad, huh? That's crazy.
You selecting the podcast on your podcast app has summoned us to the recording studio where we are now broadcasting this live.
Zach,
So-
I'm talking to the audience right now.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, welcome to, I almost said my other podcast. Welcome to Get Dumped On, the podcast where four friends get together. One person takes over the lead every single time and just dumps some knowledge, either a story or a topic or what have you. And the other three listen. Speaking of the other three, they listen and learn. Ash is here as well. Ash, say hello.
Hello, I'm here.
Ash is here. And Bo, the one and only as well.
Oh, it's me, the one and only here as well.
The only person
Hey,
never to be
Bo.
named Bo in the history of the universe.
Look
It's
it
true.
up.
If
There's
you meet
never-
another Bo, they are a liar.
Yeah, they're
It's just
extinct.
this Bo
It's
with
just me.
wearing a mask.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I'm really fast and I can change costumes really easily.
it's crazy. And speaking of crazy,
And height and
speaking
stuff.
of our speaking of crazy, our great host for the day, Zach has a story he's going to regale us with. Unfortunately, he did not tell us what it is. I'm sure Ash knows because, you know, the whole living together and being married thing. But Zach, what do you got for us today?
Hey, I've been working on this one for quite some time, and I'm pleased to finally be able to regale you with one of my favorite stories. Have you ever heard of a man named Ernest Shackleton?
I feel like he owes me $10,
I feel like he's made up.
Mhm.
but I've never met this person nor heard of them.
Okay, well, the story of Ernest Shackleton is a really great one. It's the story of the first attempt to cross Antarctica
Oh, okay.
in 1914.
I think I know a little about this.
This one is a bit of a companion piece to the tragedy of the whale ship Essex, except what would happen if you had competent leadership at the helm.
Oh,
And so this is
I like
this
that.
is- yeah. There's a couple of bummers throughout it, but overall it's not too bad. It's a really great story of human perseverance.
that was something that was sorely needed in the whale ship Essex whole
Yeah.
vibe. Is they made
Competent
horrible
leadership?
decision after horrible decision after
Mhm.
horrible decision.
Except for Owen Chase, the only whale boat that didn't run out of food. And did they eat anybody on Owen Chase's boat? I can't remember.
They ate a
I think
couple of
they
people,
won.
but not as many as the others.
They
Not
don't
as
have, like,
they ate
many
at least
though,
one.
and that's
They
what's
had-
important.
they had fingers, so like they had little appetizers. They didn't eat the
Oh,
whole thing. Yeah.
Finger licking,
Little
that comes from that.
finger sandwiches.
Oh, that's where KFC got it from.
So yeah,
God.
this is a story that I've had in my head since about the same time that I first read the story of the Essex. This is mostly going to be adapted from a book called Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage by a guy
Great
named
book.
Alfred Lansing. Really good book. It was written in the 50s.
You're really on a boat kick, man.
We're back in our nautical era.
Yeah,
Not
we're
all of it.
touching the nautical
Not
stuff.
all
again.
of it takes place on a boat. There's only some
A
of it's on a
ship,
boat. The
sorry.
middle of it's not on a
Sorry.
boat at all.
Also, Zach really likes ships and the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Boats are cool. I think it's neat that people see a bunch of water and they're like, hey, let's float on it and try and go somewhere. Oh, and I've got a big cloth and I'm going to use the wind to push me around. That's the insanest shit I've ever heard. But people
That-
did it
yeah.
for centuries.
If you think about that now, no, you're a crazy person.
Yeah.
But back then, they're like, the wind's going that way. I'm going to go that way.
So
And just see what's over there.
So this episode's going to be primarily the meat of this is going to be about the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition, which I think was what it was called, the Shackleton's Endurance Expedition. But while I was putting out together my notes and doing some more research, I found out a bunch of really fun facts about Antarctica and the history of Antarctic exploration that are going to serve as a little appetizer to all of it.
I like
really want to talk about
speaking of
Antarctica.
Fingers, I love an appetizer.
We're going back to appetizers, huh?
Antarctica is kind of wild.
You guys hungry?
This is a continent that's just
Hungry for
covered in
knowledge.
ice all the time, you know? And it's the South Pole is there, which is interesting that the South Pole is on a landmass because the North Pole is not on a landmass. And so it's just this big fucking continent at the bottom of the planet.
It kind of looks like the butt of the planet. Like it just like falls down there, you know, even though like the Earth is upside down, I get it or whatever. But
you know, what's crazy is that it wasn't always where the South Pole is. It was actually in the Northern Hemisphere for a period of time during the Cambrian. If you remember the Cambrian from
the fake explosion. Got it.
From the fake explosion. Yeah. So 360 million years ago.
I forgot about that. You lied to us. Now I'm excited.
It was in the Northern Hemisphere as part of Gondwana, which is the kind of mega continent that had like South America and Africa and all that stuff on it. And so, like, as a result, it used to be pretty warm. And it had like tetrapod life. So it like had like terrestrial animals that lived on it. It had some dinosaurs at a certain point in time. You can find dinosaur fossils in
Antarctica. Oh my God, I can't talk. Antarctica.
Yeah, in Antarctica.
I was trying to be shocked, but I was shocked by how my tongue didn't work.
So I noticed we don't make fun of Andrew when he's struggling to say words, but when I say it, it's a whole gang mentality on me to jump on Bo. Haha, look, he can't speak. Oh, Andrew, you sweet summer child, you can speak terribly if you want.
Why are you talking like a Southern lady?
Because I'm mad.
You summer child. Like,
oh, bless your heart, you sweet summer child.
Exactly.
Thank you.
See, that's Andrew. That's how you guys treat Andrew. And then there's me, Bo, you fucking idiot. Learn to speak. You do a podcast, you can't even speak. Get out of here. Who likes you?
I think Zach says that at least 10 times an episode. I think you're right.
I don't know if I ever say, Bo, I love it when you talk. I love hearing your voice. You got a really nice voice. I like hearing you talk.
No, it's not even that. It's when I missay words or say other wrong words. That's when you guys jump on me.
Say a word real quick, just as an example.
Schmoove.
It was a really good attempt at a word. I'm glad you did that.
Zach's trying to.
I know he's trying to butter me up. You can't, dude. Like
I like to schmoove it.
You're the knife's already in, Zach. You're just twisting it at this point. Just let me die.
Speaking of twisting knives, what happened in Antarctica?
There were dinosaurs. There's dinosaur fossils. There's a really cool dinosaur that is only found in Antarctica that is called Cryolophosaurus, which kind of looks like an Allosaurus, but with a really cool head crest, which is fun, and I love him.
It sounds like a cold loaf of bread that's also a dinosaur.
Pretty much. It means like cold crested lizard, something like that.
I wasn't that far off.
Wow, so innovative.
Yeah, right?
It has a crest and we found it somewhere cold.
And it also had a lot of synapsids on it during the Triassic, which was the time period before the Jurassic, so I should have said that first. But a synapsid is basically like a pre mammal. And so that's kind of interesting. And speaking of synapsids, do you know Dimetrodon? Have you heard of Dimetrodon? Is that big one that's got the goofy sprawled out legs and the gigantic sail?
No.
Well, that's not a dinosaur. Everyone always thinks it's a dinosaur. It's not a dinosaur. It's a synapsid. It's more closely related to us than it was to dinosaurs.
I didn't think it was a dinosaur. I didn't think about it at all.
Yeah, well.
I didn't know it was a thing.
You know, it's fine. For the people out there who know vaguely about dinosaurs, that's a fun fact for you. Good job. So
Did
Antarctica.
you just say good job to yourself?
No, I said good job to the listeners for knowing
Ash,
things.
Be honest. Was he patting himself on the back when he said that?
I don't know. We don't record in the same room anymore.
And I feel like it was like a patronizing, like, good job. Like, yeah, good job.
Good job, idiot.
You
Oh, jeez.
fucking child.
So Antarctica began breaking off from Gondwana around 160 million years ago. It was fully separate around 30 million years ago, and it was pretty much fully the Antarctica that you think of around 10 million years ago. Now it has 9 species of penguins, which is great. It's tough for a lot of ectothermic, like warm-blooded animals to live there. I mean, cold-blooded animals to live there, like fish and arthropods. And a lot of them have to manufacture a sort of like organic antifreeze within their bodies to not freeze.
That's the raddest shit that I've ever heard.
Wild.
So cool.
Their bodies like produce chemicals that prevent them from freezing. It completely
My body
insane.
just produces chemicals that are stinky. Farts. Fart joke.
Now imagine if your farts prevent you from freezing.
That would be great.
Pretty cool. Although
That would be cool. Like, I'm cold. Brr. Not anymore.
But I like being cold, though. That's the problem. I don't want to just get warm. That'll be uncomfortable.
Yeah, in the summer, too, like if you go to a chili cook-off and then you fart and then you're still warm, like that would suck.
Yeah, that's true. What do you think there's more of, species of seals or species of bears in Antarctica?
This is a trick question.
Bears. Let's just go with bears. Or
I'm going to go
unless
with
you're
seals.
I'm going to go with seal bears.
The answer is seals. There's no bears. Ha
Oh
ha.
my God,
Idiot.
Fucking God. See, there it goes again. He's shaming me for not knowing.
No, it's okay because you said seals, so you're fine.
He said bears.
There's always the idea of people.
I said bears.
You said seal bears. You said seal bears, so you said seals.
Yeah, it's okay, sweetheart. You did it.
Yeah.
You're doing great, sweetie.
You're doing great.
So the fun thing that is
You're
the
so
common
much
image.
child. Okay.
The common image is of a polar bear like eating an emperor penguin, but actually polar bears and penguins. Polar bears only live in the northern hemisphere, and penguins only live in the southern hemisphere. And so a polar bear and a penguin have never met.
Whoa.
Until now. Bring him out. Oh, wait. This isn't a talk show.
How big do you think the largest purely terrestrial animal native to Antarctica is?
45 pounds.
Very big.
Nailed it.
I'm thinking like a killer whale. Big.
No,
Big killer
terrestrial. So the largest animal that lives on the land year round permanently.
Penguin.
Super penguin.
Mega penguin.
30 pounds.
Well, penguins go in the water. Penguins are not purely terrestrial.
Holy
They
God,
swim
just
a
give me
lot.
the answer.
Okay.
It's the Antarctic midge, which is a flightless fly that's a fifth of an inch long. It's a flightless fly.
What's the point of a fly that don't fly?
So it's a bug.
Yeah, it's a
It's
bug.
not a fly, it's a bug.
And it because it's flightless, it's the only animal that is purely terrestrial that lives on Antarctica.
What kind of sick asshole called it a flightless fly? That's
Yeah. It
they're like,
is
look at that fly over there. It's on the ground. Like, it doesn't fly.
genetically speaking, it is a fly. It just
No.
doesn't have wings.
I'm sure
Then
it
it's
was more
not a
like,
fucking fly.
what is this weird beetle? I don't understand what this is. Oh my God, it's a fly.
Yeah. Isn't
No.
that wild?
That is a
That is
scientist
wild.
being a jerk.
I think emperor penguins are the only animal that will breed in the winter in Antarctica. And the winter is during our summer because it's in the southern hemisphere and the
Whoa.
seasons are flipped. This will come
Whoa.
into play later.
Whoa.
Next is some facts on human exploration of Antarctica. Who do you think were the first humans to set eyes on Antarctica? Would it be Europeans in the 1800s, Chinese sailors in the 1500s, or Polynesians in the 600s?
When in doubt, go the oldest one. Polynesian all the way.
Polynesians.
They were known for their sailing, so
Yeah.
that makes sense.
And their
This was
eyesight.
something that I thought was really interesting because it's just kind of going further into the incredible like sailing and exploration abilities of Polynesian people. And so there are oral traditions and stories like carved into these like story logs that I forgot the name of, and I'm doing a horrible culturally insensitive thing by not naming them correctly.
Cancel.
But stories dating to before European contact that tell about this explorer who was named Hui Te Rangiora, who was a Maori, and he traveled in a prow canoe with a house on it. They all have
That's
houses on them,
fucking awesome.
but he traveled in a canoe with a house on it to a land
To a land down under.
the canoe was called Te Iwi o Atea, to a place. And so the stories tell about a place where rocks grow out of the sea into space. The water is full of women's hair. There's an animal that dives to great depths, and the snow is made of the water is made of pia. And so this all correlates with like descriptions of Antarctica. So like the rocks growing out of the sea into space are like craggy cliffs. The water full of ladies' hair is the kelp forests that are in the water in Antarctica. And the animal that dives to great depths obviously are seals and penguins and stuff. And then the pia is arrowroot, which is a vegetable, a root vegetable. And if you shave it, it shaves off into something that looks like snow.
Hmm.
And so like people living in New Zealand wouldn't have much they wouldn't have a word for snow in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't get very snowy there. And so this is how they conceptualized it. And that's pretty cool.
Nuts. That's absolutely
I think it's
nuts
pretty sweet.
They made it all the way there. Like, that's still a really long journey.
To Antarctica.
And live to tell about it.
To tell about
canoes.
it with wind and canoes.
And a paddle and hopefully a jacket.
Yeah.
And so this was 1,200 years before Europeans made it there.
Real talk, though. So people always talk about, like, if I want to go back in time and I'd go to this place, I'd go to that place. Like, Polynesia at that time, I think would be pretty amazing to go see.
People were doing crazy stuff.
Yeah, like if I could be a fly on the wall, oh my God, so cool.
A flightless fly.
Like, I don't want to see King Arthur be a dick, you know? I want to go see some flightless flies with some Polynesians.
Yeah. And so the interesting thing about European conceptions of Antarctica is that it was a theoretical continent way before it was actually ever sighted by anybody. So map makers and like geologists in the like 15 and 1600s had this theory that the planet had to be balanced or else it would tip over.
Yeah.
And so because Eurasia in the northern hemisphere is so big, they figured that the southern hemisphere had to have another big continent as well that they just hadn't found yet.
You know, that's a good educated guess.
Yeah. And so if you look at old maps from like the 1600s, anything from before the 1700s, they have this big continent that is just, it's a different shape on every map, but it's called Terra Australis Incognita, which is like mysterious southern land in the southern hemisphere. And it's pretty crazy. And so the Antarctic Circle, which is a geographic circle, like longitudinally around the continent, was first crossed by James Cook in 1773. And we could do a whole episode on James Cook. He was like this big deal explorer. I'm not going to do it right now, but 1773, pretty cool. 2 European explorers on separate expeditions then sighted land first in 1820. So 1820 is when they first saw the land. 1823, a guy named James Weddell got closer, and a lot of stuff in Antarctica was named after him, including the Weddell Sea, which is very important to this coming story.
I've heard of the Weddell Sea before.
Okay. Well, we're going to be talking about it a lot.
I watched Jeopardy.
The other, so I'm skipping over a lot of ones here, but the other important ones are James Ross in an expedition from 1839 to 1841, which visited the Antarctic and got closer and closer. And he was on 2 ships called the Erebus and the Terror. And this was
the Terror.
The Terror, yeah. This was a successful one. And the real heads will remember the Terror from the episode about the ice mummies. Because after this expedition, the Terror and the Erebus were taken on the ill-fated Franklin expedition to try and find the Northwest Passage, where everyone died and the ships were lost.
Damn.
Then the first expedition to winter on land was in 1899 with a Norwegian guy named Karsten Borchgrevink.
You made that up. That's just like me saying schmoove.
His name was Schmoove.
As far as I could tell, I mean, I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but it's Borchgrevink.
Well, his name wasn't Schmoove, but they called him that. You know, it was a cool nickname, but you had to be there, you know, to understand what it was.
Old Schmoop. And then the most important of the kind of early age of they call it the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, was the 1901 Robert Falcon Scott expedition. His middle name was Falcon, which is
that's his legal name.
That's his actual legal name, was Robert Falcon Scott, which is
that's pretty fucking cool.
That's a great name.
Yeah.
You name your kid middle name Falcon, like they're gonna be an explorer.
Yeah, now I'm rethinking every name for children. I really think I should name my kid's middle name like Billionaire.
Just name him Robert Falcon Scott.
2.
That'll be his full name. So they were trying to get to the South Pole. They made it to within 410 miles, but had to turn back.
Why?
They tried again, just because they ran out of supplies and everyone was in poor health and they couldn't make it any further.
Got it.
They tried again in 1910. And this was at the same time they found out after they left that a guy named Roald Amundsen was doing the same thing. And he was Norwegian as well, or Swedish. I didn't write it down for some reason.
He's from Norway.
But he was some sort of...
I'm going to find the ice place.
Nordic fellow. And so they basically race each other to the pole. Roald Amundsen wins. And Scott's team finds their equipment there. And they got there about a month after he did.
Wow. They really lost that race.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're dealing with the sort of scale of time that it takes to cross Antarctica or to get to the pole, it's kind of a month is not really that long of a time. And so they were
did
both
you say
going.
They knew? Sorry, did you say they knew that Roald was doing this as well?
They found out after they left that he had already left.
Okay, so
and
they were like, "Oh
we
crap,
can beat him."
someone's going to be there," and then they get there and they're like, "Oh crap, he was already here." He's like left a note on like a stake that was like, "See you losers" or something.
Pretty much. They actually left behind extra supplies.
Oh, that's nice.
Because they were like, they knew that they were coming. They were like, well, they could probably
you guys will need this,
supplies.
You idiots. You failed the first time.
And so basically it was get to the pole and then go back the way that you came. And so Amundsen's team was successful. They got to the pole. They went back the way they came. Scott's team went to the pole and then they died on the way back.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. The last person, they pretty much all died of scurvy and cold exposure 11 miles from their final.
11 miles?
Dude, you could see it.
Yeah. And the bodies, but the bodies weren't found until 7 months later. Because the conditions in Antarctica are insane. And this is also like in January.
Really difficult to like even get there.
And so one guy at one point left they were all in a tent, and one guy just said, "I am just going outside and maybe sometime," and they never saw him again.
Damn.
Yeah.
Let's wildly speculate on what happened to him.
Bears. Oh, wait.
I mean, he probably fell down a some sort of
flies got him. The flies got him.
Oh, God.
The flies got him.
They enacted their revenge.
Do you think he fell
being called flightless flies?
Fell down and then froze to the ground?
Probably.
That's what makes
H.P.
this
Lovecraft has a story
that-
called At the Mountains of Madness, which is all about horrible things existing under the ice in Antarctica.
I think he somehow found a magical, like barbershop looking pole, and he touched it, and now he's Santa.
Whoa, in the South Pole?
But Southern Pole,
Yeah.
South Pole Santa.
The
they're rivals.
If you touch it, you get replaced as Santa, and the person who was Santa before you gets to go home finally.
Mm.
That's a good story.
Is this a Santa Claus situation?
Maybe, but without Tim Allen because he sucks.
Yeah.
But that's what makes this whole thing like way harder, because you have to go through a really intense boat journey through really difficult conditions, and then you go to a very inhospitable place that is very difficult to traverse. It's like it's just stacking and stacking and stacking.
Yeah, you have to bring all of your supplies with you the entire time. They were relying on dog sleds, and the dog sleds and hiking when the dogs couldn't sled anymore any further. And it's cold and it's windy and it's snowing and
your cell phone doesn't work.
There's times when you can't see in front of you. At the very least, they were doing it in the summer when the sun is up for 24 hours a day, instead of doing it in the winter when there will be like no sun for a week.
All right, new challenge.
Well, yeah, new challenge. Ernest Shackleton, who decided that it was time to be the first group to cross Antarctica instead of going to the pole and then coming back the way that you came.
Oh.
So this is going to be this is now the situation. You know that it's a high stakes expedition. It's difficult. Nobody's crossed Antarctica because it's super hard.
You don't even know how fucking big it is.
Yeah, you don't even know how fucking big it is.
It's really dangerous. People have already died.
Yeah,
people have already died.
Doing something arguably less dangerous.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
One already became Santa.
Yeah, one became Santa. So Ernest Shackleton was a merchant navy officer who had gotten a taste for exploration when he was the third officer on Scott's Discovery expedition, which was the one that had to turn back when they were 400 miles from the pole.
Oh.
He was sent home early because he got sick. But at the time he had left, he had led dogs to the farthest point south that anyone had gone at that point. By all accounts, he was the kind of guy who always had trouble at like succeeding at normal people shit, because he always like had something cool on his mind. Like he was always like, this shit's beneath me. I was made to do really cool stuff, and I'm going to do really cool stuff. So I'm going to find something really cool to do. So once he got in his mind that he was going to like do something cool with Antarctica, he couldn't focus on anything else. The only thing he could think about was Antarctica. He was laser focused on Antarctica.
He got the travel bug. You know, in his Tinder profile, he was like, love to travel, but love to be cold.
I love being cold. He went on another expedition to Antarctica in 1907, but it ultimately failed as well but it did lead to an extremely successful book and lecture circuit. This meant that people knew who he was. People like Shackleton was a name that people knew at the time, and they were expecting him to do something cool again. So in 1910, or after word got back from that the pole had been reached, he was like, okay, somebody made it to the pole. Well, I'm going to cross the whole damn continent.
Anything you can do, I can do better. Doubly is
pretty
better.
much.
So exactly. He's petty. So Andrew and him would get along really
honestly,
well.
That sounds like a me thing.
Yeah, by all accounts, he and Scott were kind of frenemies. So I can see him being like, I'll just
did you hear, Ernest? We reached the pole. Yeah, well, guess what? I'm going across the whole thing.
Well, so what was his plan to get it? Like, did they have another boat waiting for him, or?
So the plan that he came up with was that he was going to lead a team that would do the crossing of the continent. They were going to approach it from one side with all of their stuff and half of the supplies that they needed to make it across. Then at the same time, another team would approach the continent from the other side, and they would go inland, not like all the way, but far enough that they would be leaving caches of supplies. Then they would cross the pole and then kind of get these caches of supplies to make it all the way across. And so that was ultimately the plan. And so to make it happen, they needed 2 ships, 2 crews, and ultimately a shitload of money. So, and obviously he was going to lead the team that did the crossing because he wanted all of the glory. And so his team was going to approach Antarctica through the Weddell Sea. And this is for people who aren't looking at a map of Antarctica right now. Bo, do you know how Antarctica has that like funny little arm?
Yeah,
kind of sticking out of
like
it.
Arms, the little finger sticking out, like
yeah, like a little finger.
Yeah,
the Weddell Sea is in the armpit of that funny little arm, and so it's full of pack ice, but it also goes further into the continent. So it's a good place to start from if you're going to cross the continent.
Why did you call out me? Why didn't you ask Andrew or Ash?
Well, because Andrew already said that he knows what the Weddell Sea is, and Ash has read this book before.
Makes sense. Continue.
Okay. The Ross Sea, the other one was going to approach from the Ross Sea, going into the continent and putting down the supply crates that they would use to make the second half of their journey.
For being like a real guy, I want to do adventure, I'm going to do something cool. Like, if you look at Antarctica, he really, like, I guess he's maximizing his chance for success because he picked the 2 narrowest points, but like, I don't know, seems maybe a little bit like cheating.
It's not cheating, it's min-maxing.
Yeah.
You can call it whatever you want.
It's the distance between the Weddell Sea and the Ross Sea is like less than half of the distance of the biggest part of the continent.
Yeah, I'm staring at I'm looking at it right now.
Let's try a continent at the narrowest part before we try to cross it at the widest part.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
okay.
But like, don't pretend that you did, though. Like, I know they didn't have maps back then, so he could be like, I did it totally, but
they had maps.
Yeah, but like not like hugely accurate maps. I assume that they were
maps.
Just like
maps didn't exist till recently. Everyone knows that.
Yeah, they invented those in the early 2000s.
A lot of the stuff had been like cited, but I mean, yeah, nobody had. They were definitely going to be crossing parts of the continent that no one had seen or set foot on before. It ended up being harder than expected to get all of the money that they needed because
really,
yeah, the plan was a little on the crazy side. People like expected that he'd be able to do it, but they were also pretty sure that he would probably die in the process.
So you don't want to give him all your money if he's just going to die.
So people didn't want to give him all of his money.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah, but he did end up getting enough. He asked for a modest 5,000 pounds from a Scottish jute manufacturer named James Caird, who ended up giving him 24,000 pounds. The government ended up giving him 24,000 pounds. The Royal Geographic Society gave him 1,000 pounds, which is basically more of just a, we will allow you to do this, than any actual like reasonable donation. He got 10,000 from a guy named Dudley Docker, who was a cricketer and a businessman, and an undisclosed but significant amount from Janet Stancombe Wills, who is an heiress. And normally I wouldn't give you those names, but those names come into play later. James Caird, Dudley Docker, and Janet Stancombe Wills. And then he got a bunch of smaller donations from hundreds of other people who thought that it would be cool that this would happen. Then basically he doubled that money by pre-selling the book and the book tour and the photograph rights that would come out of the expedition's success. So he was doing this with a big debt hanging over his head that he knew he would have to repay once he got back. But ultimately, he ended up with about 80 to 90,000 pounds, which I calculated it out, and I think it's about equivalent to $10.5 million in today's money.
What?
I don't know how accurate the calculations that I did were.
That is so much money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. He put out a call for crew members and received 15,000 applications, 3 of which were from girls. This was basically a volunteer thing. There was they were paying them, but not much.
He has $10 million, buddy.
They were paying people, but not that much. I think it would be the equivalent today of like $350, something like that. And pretty much everyone was like motivated by the call to adventure. They were like, I'm going to go on this adventure and like get glory from being in the first party to cross Antarctica.
I'm going to need to see some pay slips from how much this guy was paying himself. Because that's messed up.
I don't think he was paying himself very much at all. From all intents and purposes, Shackleton was not a guy who was very motivated by money. He was motivated by wanting to be the guy who did cool shit. And all of the money that he had, he put into this. And pretty much
that's for me and that guy are different. I'm always motivated by money. Give me the money.
He was like a human nonprofit where the 103C was dedicated towards exploring Antarctica. And so my favorite part of this like preamble to the expedition is that of the people who made it to interviews, none of the interviews lasted more than 5 minutes. It was all vibes with him. He like got a look at somebody and could immediately tell whether or not he thought they would be like, whether or not they had the right stuff for the expedition. And I think that is just really the way the job interview should be, I think.
I like the cut of your jib.
Yeah.
I mean, you should know if they know how to sail a boat.
Well, importantly, the main guys, like the captain and the second in command, and the really like the important people were people he had worked with before. It was like everyone else. He was just like, yeah, I like you. There was one of them where he was like,
you just want to hang out with them.
There was one of them where he was like, why do you wear glasses? And the guy was like, well, a wise face is missing something without glasses. And he was like, that's funny. You're in.
He's like, you're going to be the funny guy.
See, that's how I would, that would be me. That would be me.
There was another guy where he just looked at him and he was like, can you sing? And he was like, well, I'm not like an opera singer. And he's like, well, you can shout a bit with the boys, right? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, okay, you're on.
This guy, I don't like
sing?
this.
No, I can dance.
Like, hey man, can you sing? No. Can you yell? Yeah, get in here. Like that. What? What? Do you want to be paid next to nothing?
Can you breathe?
Get in
breathe?
here.
You're hired.
I think it's more like, hey, do you sing? Not really. Well, are you willing to do it when we all start to singing? Because I don't want somebody just sitting in the corner like a sad sack.
I really think
we want a team player here. If you're not going to be involved, we don't want you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of like, I feel like this is kind of the equivalent of the philosophy of don't hire somebody who already has the skills. Hire somebody who you get along with and who you think will fit into the company culture, and then make sure that you can teach them the skills along the way.
You aren't going to mind spending.
But what if the person who already knows the skills is already a cool person? He's overlooking all these other prospects just for people who can yell.
That's just about, well, not everybody was determined on whether or not they could yell. The important part is that he had worked with the higher-ups before.
Some guy comes in, he's like, oh man, I shouldn't have worn this shirt. It has hot dogs all over it. And the guy's like, you're crazy. Get in here. Like, whoa, you're the hot dog guy.
Hey, it's the hot dog guy.
Yeah, go hot dogging.
For all, what's what I'm trying to say?
Intents and purposes.
For all like criticisms that we could make of this process, it seemed to work out pretty well for how things turned out. Then the ship itself, the big deal ship, the Endurance, which would be the ship that Shackleton was on and the ship that would go through the Weddell Sea, was bought for £14,000. It was a 3-mast barkentine and an absolute motherfucker of a ship. This was the early 1900s, so it did have a coal engine, and it had an incredibly strong hull sheathed in greenheart, which is a wood that's denser than iron, which is bananas.
Holy shit.
And it was pretty much purpose built for pack ice. The bow of it was 4 feet thick, and the shape of the hull on the bottom was like purposely intended for going on ice and everything. It was like, this was the best ship that they could have gotten for the situation. And it was kind of like this was, towards the end of the like heroic age of Antarctic exploration. The ship had to be purpose built. And it was actually started being built a couple of years before, but they had run out of money. Like the shipyard ran out of money. And so he gave them like the final influx of cash that they needed to finish it and get it going.
Damn. So that was the ship you said that was going to pick them up?
So that was the ship. No, this was the ship that they were going to be on going into the Weddell Sea.
Got it.
The other ship was called the Aurora. I mean, it was also great, but it wasn't as great. And also, I'm not going to be talking about them as much because they're not in the story.
Well, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. If you want to hear about the Aurora, I'll tell you what happened at the end.
Go Borealis yourself.
Venmo Zach, $10. He'll tell you all about it. That's a paywall.
This is already going to be a long episode. If I start talking about the Aurora, we're going to be here for 3 hours.
You're already 40 minutes in and you have not started this story.
Yeah. So they're getting going. They set sail August 8th, 1914. Sailing to Antarctica from England sucked because the ship was so perfectly adapted for the ice that it sucked being on the open ocean, which is kind of funny. And so the crew was seasick most of the time.
Well, is it because it was like big and beefy and...
Yeah, it was big and beefy, and it didn't like it was always kind of listing from side to side. It wasn't a very smooth ride. It had a shallow keel, I think, and so it wasn't very stable in that situation. And the captain was a guy named Frank Worsley, and he led a pretty loose ship, not very disciplined, a little rowdy, but everyone got to know each other. There was some fights at the beginning. One guy got demoted. One guy got kicked off at Buenos Aires, but they replaced him.
If you get kicked off, is just in the middle of the ice at that point? Like,
no, they were at
the ice. Yeah,
he said Buenos Aires.
They were in Buenos Aires, and so at Buenos Aires they picked up 69 sled dogs that had been shipped down from Canada. And they got a stowaway.
So you're saying in Buenos Aires, they were like, Buenos dias. Did they say that?
No, I thought they were Buenos dias. Now Buenos Aires out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this guy, Pierce Blackborough, had interviewed to be the replacement for the guy who got kicked out.
We don't have names like that no more. Like every name you've ever mentioned is like great. I'm like, that's a fucking dope name. We got people named like Bo. Like, no, come on. I thought a cool
name.
Bo's a pretty good name.
No, but there were. Come on now.
The Endurance did have 3 guys on it named Frank. So,
and all of them were called Frank the Tank. It was very confusing.
But they all knew which Frank was being addressed.
I mean, they all referred to each other by their last names. And then we'll also go into a little bit. They all had cute nicknames for each other, too.
Oh.
And so Blackborough was rejected as a replacement for the guy who got kicked off, but his friend was accepted as the replacement. And so he snuck Blackborough onto the ship as well. And then once they got out to sea, Blackborough revealed himself and was like, hey, I'm here now. And Shackleton was royally pissed off. And he just yelled at him and yelled at him and yelled at him. And then finally he was like, okay, well, we could use an extra hand, but if we run out of food and anyone is to be eaten, you will be first.
That's fair. Mm-hmm. I would accept those terms if I were that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, you had to. You're on a boat.
Pretty much. So time on the ship was spent singing. Harry McNish, who was the carpenter, his nickname was Chippy because...
That's a great name and a great nickname. Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Chippy McNish.
Love chips.
Chippy was a common nickname for carpenters because they were always chipping bits of wood away with their chisels. And he became super friendly with the ship's cat, who they named Mrs. Chippy, but later they turned out was a boy.
It was a boy, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But they called him Mrs. Chippy, and Mrs. Chippy liked to climb on the rigging with apparently zero effort, was incredibly agile in the rigging of the ship, and liked to walk along the tops of the dogs' kennels and rile them up.
Classic. I love that cat.
And then finally, on November 5th, they arrived at South Georgia Island, which was pretty much their last port before it was Antarctica time. There was a whaling camp there, which is where they stopped and, got some land time, got their last bit of supplies ready. And they got word while they were there that the ice was pretty much the worst anyone had ever seen.
Cool.
And so they were like, okay, well, let's wait and see if it will get better, because it's November. So it's the springtime. So they're like, okay, well, let's get into the summer and see if the ice is a little bit better. But it actually got worse. And so they weren't about to turn around because they had already gotten all the way there. So they decided, fuck it, we ball.
I know. He's like, I spent 10 million goddamn, we're going.
Yeah. So they set sail on December 5th after spending a month at South Georgia Island waiting for the conditions to get better. And so for a while, it was good going. They were making really good progress, and they hit the pack ice and just started blasting through it like they thought they would. They were slamming through big floes. They were spotting whales. They were powering through ice and being manly men. They were like, yeah, we're fucking manly. We're in this big ship, and we're blasting our way through all this ice.
Here. Har,
but the Weddell Sea is big, and even when you're blasting through ice, they were making, on a good day, they could go 50 to 100 miles, but by Christmas, they were only doing like 30 miles a day and getting slower and slower. Then January 24th, they got wedged in a crack between two ice floes. They ran the coal engines, but they couldn't make any progress. Before they knew it, they were surrounded by ice floes that were like 40 feet thick coming out of the water. And they spent a month stuck in the ice trying to chop up the ice in front of the ship to open up the water and get, make some sort of progress.
Okay, hold on. Pause.
Okay.
If they are blasting through ice that clearly needs a boat or ship that is that big to get through it, why don't you just park the boat and start your journey then?
So this is a great point, and this is something that, so the ice is basically, if you think about like any sort of like Antarctic or Arctic documentaries that you've seen, there's like the open ocean that has these like flat ice floes all along it. These are like 20 to 40 foot wide like floes of ice, and it's thick, but they're not like solid. They can be thick, and sometimes they're more frozen than others. But we're also at the point where the ice is kind of like, it's just like really wet snow, and it's frozen. Have you ever been like after a really wet snowfall and it's like really dense and thick, and you like try to walk through it and it just makes your boots soaked?
No, I live in California.
Okay.
Yeah, but I was in California.
It was kind of like that. So by the end of February, the ship was essentially frozen for good in the ice. And at this point, it was the beginning of the Antarctic autumn. They knew that the conditions weren't going to get any better, and that they figured that they'd be stuck in the ice until next summer.
So they were stuck. They got stuck for a month, and then they waited another month.
Yeah, so basically they were stuck and trying to get the ship out for a month, making zero progress until eventually they got frozen even more than when they were stuck, because there was like a cold spell.
And
it was really windy. So the ice wasn't stable enough to get all the way to the mainland. And there would often be times that you'd be stuck in an ice floe, and then you'd encounter like a big bit of open water. So they had these dogs on sleds. They couldn't like hop from ice floe to ice floe because they had to be able to get their dogs on the sleds, right? And so there wasn't like a continuous stretch of ice floe to get to land. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so that was going to be the issue. So they all kind of came to the conclusion that the only thing that they could do now was stay in place, stay on the ship, and wait until next summer.
Did they have enough food to last an Antarctic winter?
So this begins the next phase of the expedition.
Oh God.
Which I call the guys being dudes phase.
Oh my God. Did they eat that guy?
No, they didn't eat that guy.
Oh my God.
This is actually the point where food was the least of their worries. They had plenty of food left in their rations, but they knew that they needed to save all of their like packed food for when they eventually made it to shore and started their journey, across the continent. But what they did have was access to basically an unlimited amount of seals and penguins. The ice floes were covered in seals and penguins, and so they could just go out onto the ice and go hunting for seals and penguins. Like the penguins would just waddle up to the ship, and they would be like, "Aha, gotcha!" And they were eating hundreds of penguins. They were lousy with penguin meat.
What do you think penguin tastes like?
Now, I feel like now you're going to tell me that they ate so many penguins that they changed the dynamic of some penguin culture or something, like made something go extinct.
Is penguin meat good?
Yeah, do you think it tastes more like chicken or more like fish?
That's a great question.
I think it probably tastes more like fish.
It was very blubbery.
Go eat a penguin and get back to it.
I don't want that.
We're going to send you to Antarctica. We need you to go catch the burliest penguin you can see.
Get a big boat, though, so you could smush through that sea. And do that.
Rent you some sled dogs, too. Bunch of baltos.
The other advantage here, too, is that they didn't have to worry about any of the food rotting because they were basically living in a freezer.
It's all frozen.
Yeah. So they just had to make sure that as long as they like prepared the meat and didn't let the guts like sit in it, you know, they just made sure that they gutted the penguin, the meat would freeze. And then you just thaw it out and cook it when you needed to eat it. They would make this stew with like melted snow and boil up like the penguin or the seal meat in it. It was called hoosh. They all got very tired of it by the end.
They said that penguin did not taste good, right?
Yeah. They were all super tired of it by the end. And so for the first few months that they were stuck on the ice, the men were really just trying to make the most of it. And so they would have
being stuck somewhere for a month.
Yeah,
let alone
not just
Antarctica.
a month. By the end of this, you will be amazed by the amount of time that they spent down there.
Jesus.
And so for just the first couple of months, they were really just trying to make the most of it. Everyone was actually in pretty good spirits for a while. And this is why I call it the guys being dudes phase, because they were having sled races on the dog sleds. They were playing hockey on the ice. They were playing music for each other. They had instruments. They had penguin catching competitions, and they were playing pranks on each other. And every once in a while, the ice would open up a bit and they'd start chopping it up, but they wouldn't really make any real progress.
Do you know what pranks they were playing? Like some guy wakes up and there's like a penguin in a sleeping bag or something. He's like, "You got penguin, yeah."
There was a lot of like cutting each other's hair in their sleep.
Oh, that's no. I mean, who are they going to impress? What am I going to?
It's like they're not looking behind. He pulls from behind, puts ice down his butt crack. That's his.
He's like, now you're cold. He's like, but we're all cold. He's like, oh, yeah.
Well, you're colder.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha,
yeah,
nerd.
Cold butt. Yeah, cold butt.
Well, this will lead into one of the pranks is the one for this one. So at this point, most interpersonal conflicts had been smoothed out and everyone was pretty fun with each other. And everyone had a fun nickname, like Chippy did. So which of these was not a real nickname that somebody in the expedition had?
Oh, man. I know it's going to be the one that I pick that I want, and it's not going to be it.
All right. Okay, I've got 5 options for you here. Wuzzles.
5?
Dough balls.
5 is a lot. You're
Sorry. Wuzzles is a clown. Just a heads up.
Wuzzles. Dough balls, marbles, belly burglar, and Buddha.
Belly burger. It has to be the belly one.
I want belly burger. If that isn't real, I'm quitting the podcast.
He knows us so much though, and he knows that's the one.
He's laughing.
I wanted to
which makes me think that is the one that is not right.
Reveal.
Just say it.
All right, do you want the answer?
What about Ash? Ash, do you know?
I don't know actually. What is it?
All right, so the not real one was marbles.
Thank
All the rest of them were real.
Okay.
Oh, tell me more about the belly burglar.
Yeah. Rest of the podcast about him, please.
The belly burglar was Timothy Orderlies, who was the...
He gonna steal your belly.
Oh, sorry, not Timothy. Thomas Orderlies, who was he was the motor expert. He was the guy who was in charge of the steam engine on the ship. And he was also, after that kind of became obsolete, he became the storehouse manager. And they called him the belly burglar because he was really stingy with giving out special rations to people.
Oh, so they were acting like he was taking stuff away from them.
Yeah.
But in reality, he was probably saving all of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was the responsible one, but they all wanted extra sugar.
Like, hey, give me food, you belly burglar. And he's like, no, stop it, no.
I'm the belly burger.
Wuzzles was Frank Worsley, and they just called him Wuzzles because it was a cute nickname for his name. And he was the captain.
I'm very stuck on the belly, but like, imagine a guy running up to somebody and this like touching their belly, like, I got your belly, and then run away. Like,
he had a couple of nicknames, but I only wrote down belly burglar.
Belly burglar, tummy tickler.
They were pretty much all related to how he was stingy. I think one of them was like a school mom or something like that. Old maid, something similar. He was generally humorless, and pretty much by the end of this, the only humor that anyone got was by making jokes at his expense, because he was never good at taking jokes. Dough balls was the cook. His name was Charles Green.
Okay.
You'd think that it was a reference to how he was a cook, but it was also a reference to how he only had one testicle.
Oh, okay. Didn't see that one coming.
And then Buddha was Hubert Hudson, who was the navigator, who was called Buddha because he was pranked when they were on South Georgia Island. He was pranked They told him that a dinner was going to be a costume party, but actually it wasn't. And he showed up wearing a bedsheet.
Do Buddhas wear bedsheets?
Yeah. They're famous for their bedsheets.
Yeah. In the 1910s, nobody knew anything about any of that. They're just like, Buddha, you're wearing a toga.
Those are two different cultures.
Yeah, I know they're two different things, but they didn't know that.
I did.
And then the belly burglar showed up and was like, "Got your belly?
Yeah, got your belly.
You get away from my belly burger."
What would everyone's Antarctic nicknames be?
That's a great
You don't
question.
give yourself a nickname.
Do we have to give
yeah.
I think we need to give it to each other. Because the nickname is earned.
Exactly.
Bo, go first. What would you give Zach?
Zach would be Jack in a Box.
Why?
Because you're always popping out of nowhere telling you stuff.
Okay. Zach, what would Ash's nickname be? You know Ash is the best, so.
I think that Ash would be Mr. Sleepy Pants, because you'd be the one who would. You would be the
I'm
one
so
who
sleepy.
would always be sleepy all the time.
Hey, where's Mr. Sleepy? Where's Mr. Sleepy Pants at?
Where did you
Sleeping.
Not leaving the bunk. The bunk area they called the Ritz because it was the warmest part of the ship.
They're putting on the Ritz.
Fancy. They have nicknames for everything. Ash, what would you give me or Bo? You pick. Actually, do me so I can give Bo one.
Okay. What's your job on the ship?
I would probably. Oh God, I don't know.
No. Here we go. Your name would be the Whiz Kid because you would always be skating and you'd be going by so fast.
Oh, I like that. That's great. And peeing while doing it.
Two things that he loves. He loves to piss and he loves to go fast.
I'll be skating by like, gotcha.
Oh, he just came by so fast. There he
Check
goes.
your shoes.
All right, so what's the one you had for Bo?
Bo's nickname is actually going to be an opposite day thing because Bo's nickname is so short and to the point. His nickname will be Bartholomew Reginaldson Whirlybird III. And it would confuse everyone because they'll be like, this guy. Oh, this guy.
Is that your name? No, it's my nickname.
No, that's my nickname. That's my shortened nickname.
What's your name? Bo.
Uno reverse card. Yeah.
You said Bartholomew Reginald Whirlybird III?
Yes, I think I said that. I forgot it as soon as I said it.
I'm calling him Whirlybird.
Whirlybird the Third has a really good rhyme to it. Yeah, Whirlybird.
But you have to roll everything like Reginald or like whatever I said. Bartholomew Reginald Whirlybird the Third.
So back to the story. They would spend the other things that they did on the ice during the guys being dudes phase would be telling stories. They'd have story time around the fires. They'd put on plays with silly costumes and off-key singing. They would have mock trials and put each other on trials for ridiculous stuff. Like one of them was robbing trouser buttons out of the offertory plate of a Presbyterian church, which just turned into rowdy court proceedings. The photographer, Frank Hurley, had slideshows, and he would show off some of his pictures that he brought with him from his previous expeditions. And the most popular one was from his trip to Java, which included, quote, waving palm trees and native maidens.
Oh.
They like
Show the ones with the boobs.
Is that
I bet
porn?
you that's what it was.
He brought porn. That's what it was.
Yeah, I mean, probably.
No, he brought
I
National
assume
Geographic magazines.
Yeah, it's pretty much, National Geographic
You want to see
magazines.
these ladies with the palm
So
trees?
they would.
They're like,
I think that
woo, woo.
the vibe that I got was by the end they were more excited to see the pictures of places that are warm.
Oh, yeah.
Guys, check this out. Look at this palm tree. Ooh.
Oh, fancy.
They played records on Sundays. They had a gramophone, but they accidentally ordered the wrong kind of needles. They ended up with a big box full of sewing needles, and they didn't realize until it was too late. And so they could only play the gramophone on Sundays. Every night at dinner, they had their ration of grog and toasted to our sweethearts and wives. May they never meet.
These men.
Oh, I just got that.
And they made igloos on the ice for the dogs so that they could get them off the ship because they were too stinky.
Oh, stinky boys. These just stinky boys.
But they got little houses. Well, these are stinky boys get a little house. You could go.
By May, the temperature was consistently below zero. And by June, it was minus 17 and dark all the time.
Holy
and
God.
by July, it was minus 35 on average. increased winds meant that ice floes were starting to squeeze the ship. And so the ice, the pressure was building up around the ship, and it was pretty much being squeezed on all sides by the ice.
Did anyone know they were there?
No. They had a radio, but radio was very new. Radio was a very new thing. And so the radio
didn't tell
only
anyone,
had,
like, hey, just in case, like, you don't ever see us again, like,
well,
come look for us?
It was going to be a long expedition. And so it was going to be an incredibly long time before anyone would expect that they were missing.
Okay.
And so they had a radio, but radio is still very new technology. And so it was only a receiver. They didn't have a transmitter.
Hey, are you guys still good?
Wait.
Hey, are you guys doing all right?
Yeah. No one's replying, so I guess we're just going to keep going.
Okay, cool. Everything sounds crystal clear. Let's go.
What do they think? They're going to set like a radio station out there? Like, hey, this is Antarctica 24.5. You're going to hear sounds of the penguins again. The only band that is on this place.
I was reading Chippy McNish's diary, and he did mention that at one point when they were having dinner and a show, a bunch of penguins waddled up to the ship, and so they started playing music for the penguins, and the penguins started like paying attention to the music until they started playing Scottish music, and then the penguins all walked away.
Racist. If there's anything I know about penguins, they hate the Scottish people.
Yeah.
It's true.
So at this point, they do have the advantage that the wind is causing them to drift south, closer to the continent. But it is having the negative effect that the ice floes are becoming more densely packed. More pressure is being put on the ship.
Smushing the ship, essentially.
Yeah, and at this point, they're starting to hear some pretty big pops and booms and cracks when they're inside the ship. There have been a couple of times where they describe like a crack of thunder. And at one point in August, it became so bad that the ship jumped into the air effectively and became basically perched on the ice.
Holy shit.
This is when people started, spirits started to wane.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, our house is about to fucking implode.
October 24th. Keeping in mind that the ship became frozen in the ice in January.
Bruh.
October 24th, renewed pressure squeezed it harder, and finally the ship started to pop. Water started coming in, and they spent 28 hours bailing water. Chippy was making dams, and they did everything that they could to stop the ship from sinking. At one point, a bunch of penguins waddled up again and started singing what they all described in their diaries as a funeral dirge for the ship. And
Those
shortly after,
like, fuck you, get out of my house. They're like,
but
they're singing all like, for us.
The penguins normally are just like making weird like brr, brr noises, and then all of a sudden they start like singing. This is a noise that none of them had ever heard penguins make before. And they were like, this is a bad sign.
They're being evicted. That's the eviction song.
And then a few hours later, Frank Wild, who was second in command, gave the order. He said, "She's going, boys. I think it's time to get off." And they abandoned ship. They got everything that they could off the ship and started sheltering on the ice, and decided that they had to come up with a plan of what to do.
So before you go on, how, if I can ask this question, if it's not a spoiler for later, how long did they anticipate it taking them going from one side to the other, just walking or trekking or whatever?
This is a great question. I forgot.
Would they have been done by now if they started when they wanted to? Is essentially my question.
I think so, yes.
Okay. So like everyone who knew them back home is like, oh, they're ice people now. They're frozen.
I think what the plan was, I have no idea.
Okay.
But this was also kind of the time when
it's been like a year.
These journeys would just take a long time, and everyone was kind of expecting it to take a long time.
People came home, they're like, wow, you actually didn't die. Congratulations.
Yeah. But this is essentially, they had no reasonable expectation that help was coming.
They didn't have a fucking two-way radio.
Yeah. It was self-reliance in a big way. And so at this point, they realized that crossing was really no longer an option. They'd gone too much into their rations. They couldn't even make it to the continent. They could see the continent at this point, but they couldn't make it there because the floes were too fractured. They wouldn't be able to get the dog sleds to the continent. And without the dog sleds, they would not be able to cross it on foot. So the best that they could figure out to do would be to wait even longer. Eventually the drift, they were hoping that eventually the drift would get them back to the open ocean when they could take their boats and somehow get word to South Georgia Island where they left from.
So they still had boats.
So they had 3 boats.
I like the idea of we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. So let's continue trying nothing.
Pretty much their only option was they were stuck. There was really nowhere that they could go. The only real option was to wait until they could drift to the open ocean. And it does make it sound like they were lazy, but this was pretty much the only thing that they could do.
I mean, yeah, like they're stuck.
Yeah. So this is pretty much when shit started to get real for everyone. There's no longer like we're having a good time with my buddies on the ice.
No, this is beds anymore.
Oh man, Fun times with the boys is over.
Yeah, fun times with the boys is over. They set up tents on the ice. Everyone's wet and cold all the time now. They no longer have, basically they took stock of what they had. They determined what could and couldn't be brought with them. Shackleton made this really big grand gesture about how he was getting rid of everything. Like he casted his gold coins and Bible onto the ground with some really elaborate words about getting rid of, the things that you don't need and persevering.
His exact words were, "Fuck this shit."
I mean, I could find his exact words, but it would take
that was it.
a few minutes of flipping through this book, which I don't feel like doing.
That was it.
The only people who were allowed to bring more than 2 pounds of personal effects with them were the photographer and the guy who had a zither banjo. And they were like, we're gonna need be able to. They're all about singing songs with each other, So we need to keep the banjo.
You fucking slay on that banjo, dog. You take that shit.
And so they made camp. They called it Ocean Camp. All right, now this is the first really bummer. This is the big bummer, and I need you all to prepare for the bummer. Okay.
I'm prepared.
Did the belly bandit actually take someone's belly and eat it in front of them?
Oh my God, it all comes full circle.
There are 3 major bummers in this story, and this is the first one.
All right, hit me with it.
They had to kill the animals who couldn't pull sledges.
Fuck you.
I'm sorry.
I'm done. See you later.
At this point, a couple of puppies had been born. They had to shoot them.
They had to shoot them?
And Mrs. Chippy. They had to get rid of Mrs. Chippy.
I hate these guys now. I hope they don't make it. This is the part. Yeah,
this is the part that, justice for Mrs. Chippy. I really cannot put into words how sad I am that they had to shoot Mrs. Chippy. And this was a really big deal for Chippy. Chippy never forgave Shackleton for ordering the destruction of Mrs. Chippy.
Why would they do that?
Well, because they were eating food and not contributing anything.
Laughter and friendship and
spirits,
this is
fluffiness and stickiness.
That's what I would say.
How much can a cat really eat?
Yeah, dog. It's like a fucking handful, bro.
Yeah, right.
There's so many penguins around you at all times. They're singing songs for you. Like, just take one.
Yeah,
I hate these guys. I hope the saddest part. I hope they lose now.
So,
they already kind of did because they didn't make it to Antarctica.
I hope they lose more.
At this point, they didn't even make it onto the land of Antarctica, and they have to turn back because everything has gone so badly. So they're all cold, and now they no longer have access to infinite penguins. Although they still have. Well, no, this is the part they still have access to penguins, but there was this is now we are traveling. And so they started making their way across the ice and seeing just how far they would be able to make it with the dog sleds.
Without dogs.
Well, they still had the dogs. They just shot the puppies. Because the dogs could pull the sleds. The puppies couldn't pull the sleds.
Hate these guys.
This was we need the dogs to pull the sleds. They
look at this sweet little puppy and they're like, oh, this thing eats too much food.
Well, if you look at the diaries, all of the men were very sad about it, at the very least. This was pretty much Shackleton being like, okay, I'm going to make the tough decisions for everyone. We cannot afford the food for these puppies. We have to get rid of them. And everyone was like, I hate this, and I hate you for making me do this. But I get it.
No.
When you're stuck in the ice in Antarctica, you have to make tough decisions. I'm not saying that I would do the same. I would keep Mrs. Chippy, even if it meant that I died.
I would feed my dog over myself and then let the dog eat my body.
Yeah.
Am I a monster for not agreeing with you two?
I will fight you.
Bo, explain.
I'm more important than any fucking pet in this world. I'm sorry.
So they start making their way across the ice to try and make it to
making the way downtown
where they can. So they've got the dogs sledding, the dogs pulling the sleds. They're like, we don't really have any other option. We'll see how far we can make it. And they go very slowly. It's like at this point, it's starting to get warmer. The ice is starting to like be a little bit meltier on the top. So it's like really deep snow on the top instead of just ice. And so by like a week, they had barely made it 20 miles from the ship. And it was so slow going that this is at the point where they're like, okay, well, I guess now we just have to stay and hope that the drift takes them closer to the open water. And they called this camp Patience Camp. In the meantime, while they were waiting, they went back to the ship for more supplies because they're like, well, we can just use these tracks that we've already made.
Yeah, they passed the giant pile of dead puppies on the way.
Yeah. And every time that they got back to the ship, it was in worse condition until eventually on November 21st, it was completely crushed and sank.
Nice.
So at this point, they were actually making decent progress in the right direction just by waiting. The ice was drifting 7 miles a day based on the like reckoning that they did with the stars. And so they used this time to prep the boats for the journey and kind of get themselves ready. And so Chippy shored up the sides of the boats because he was the carpenter, and they painted new names on the boats to just kind of like, just do normal stuff to make yourself feel like it's normal.
Where'd they get paint?
And they had paint on the ship. At this point, they had managed to get as much stuff off the ship as possible.
Okay.
They went back to the ship. So they named them the James Cairn, the Dudley Docker, and the Stancomb Wills, throwbacks to their 3 biggest donors.
Ah.
So at this point, things are bleak. They're waiting for a chance to launch the boats, and it's just not coming. The pack ice drifting is slowing, and they all kind of start suffering from some sort of madness from the constant howling of the wind, the constant snow blindness. There's this like Antarctic madness that's starting to kind of beset them. And eventually they get stuck on the ice, realize that they can't take the sleds any further. And
they shoot the sleds.
March and half in February and half in March, they shoot all the dogs.
Oh, god damn.
And this is the second bummer. This is the second big bummer. I guess this is the by second, I mean, this is the second and the third big bummer. The first is shooting half the dogs, then the third is shooting the second half of the dogs. And again, everyone is very conflicted about this because they're like, okay, well, yeah, we can't, there's no more sledges to be pulled. Like, there's no more pulling of sledges to happen. And, we need more food. And dogs, kind of a nice change of pace from eating seal all the time. At this point, they're all making casual jokes about cannibalism to each other. But everyone wrote in their diaries like, I'm really sad about shooting the dogs, but at least it's nice to not be eating seal.
Oh, man, I don't know. The
seal
belly,
is the name of one of the dogs.
The belly booger was looking kind of thick, kind of delicious.
Then by the end of March, the floe that they were sheltering on started to split, and one of the guys almost fell into the water. And then shortly after the next day, a leopard seal showed up and almost killed another one of the guys. But they actually managed to kill it. And they now had access to 2,000 pounds of meat and blubber.
Oh, they could have fed the dogs with that.
Yeah, could have fed the dogs with it, but now they can feed themselves. And so this, combined with the floe fully splitting into bits a few days later, kind of made the decision for them that it was time to make a path for themselves and set off from the camp. And so they finally, on April 9th, launched the boats. And they hopped from ice floe to ice floe, going along the water. You've got a little bit more maneuverability when you're just in a 20-foot boat rather than, a 200-foot long ship. And a few days later, they reached open ocean. And this was just kind of the beginning of the hardest part of all of it, because at this point they're hopping from ice floe to ice floe. They haven't set foot on anything solid since November. It's April, right? They haven't been on land for over a year, and like solid land. You walk around in snow and ice. It's slippery. It sucks. It doesn't really feel like solid land, And so they get to open ocean, and there's a couple of options for where they can go. South Georgia Island isn't really an option at this point because it's like 300 miles away, but they can make it to a kind of like a stopgap point, and they have 3 options for it. There's King George Island. There's another one that they never really seriously considered, and there was Elephant Island, which were all islands that had kind of been sighted but never really landed on. Like, people knew where they were, but didn't really know what to expect on them, and there was no like civilization or anything like that on these islands. They were basically just rocks in the sea that somebody had given a name to. And so April 9th, they launch and they start going to King George Island, but because of the weather conditions, they had to redirect for Elephant Island. And after 3 days of sailing without sleeping, in going across another thing that I forgot to write down. Hey, Ash, do you remember the name of that really difficult passage that they had to go across when you're researching about all those Antarctic cruises a couple months ago?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't remember.
It was the super cold one.
Yeah, the super cold one.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Is there elephants on Elephant Island?
No.
Oh.
It's kind of shaped like an elephant, which is why they called it that.
Carry on.
Classic.
The Drake Passage.
The Drake Passage, yes. So they had to go across the Drake Passage, which is kind of commonly understood to be one of the roughest, choppiest, and most difficult passages of water on the entire planet.
It's because the penguins keep singing Drake songs.
Yeah. They're just like, whoosh, whoosh. I know when that hotline bling. That can only mean one thing. And yeah. Then eventually they finally made it to Elephant Island after 3 days of sailing. And this is really, I think, an incredible testament to Frank Worsley, because he was the guy who was doing all of the navigation in terms of where they were going, and where the islands that they were going to were, because they couldn't see it. They didn't they didn't know where Elephant Island was except for his knowledge of the charts. It's a tiny island, and it was 100 miles away. And if they missed it, they were fucked. But they managed to make it there. And I think that's an incredible accomplishment.
And he hit it like dead on.
Yeah, he hit it dead on.
Just using the stars and his brain.
Yeah. After they did have equipment. They were like, we are making space for the navigational equipment more than anything else. This is the number one most important thing. But they managed to make it there. And as soon as they landed, one of the guys had a heart attack after sailing for 3 days. Out of exhaustion. But it's okay. It was a mild heart attack.
Did he survive?
He did survive.
Oh.
It was fine. It was a mild heart attack. He recovered after a couple of days. But
I don't know.
Basically,
I think they didn't have enough food for heart attack people. So they probably should have shot him.
So everyone's malnourished. Everyone's been awake for 3 days, sailing on 3 separate boats. So the fact that they also never were separated is a testament to the people who are piloting these ships.
So you're saying right now all of them are Mr. Sleepy Pants?
All of them are Mr. Sleepy Pants.
Even Belly?
Yes.
Mr. Sleepy Belly.
Mr. Sleepy Belly. So Blackborough, who, if we remember, was the stowaway, he didn't have the right boots. Because he was a stowaway, he didn't have the same equipment as everyone else. He was wearing these.
He didn't know they're going to Antarctica. He thought they were going to the Caribbean.
He was like, "We're pirates, right? Like this is, we're going to Nassau."
This entire time, he hasn't had the right boots, and
for a year.
Yeah.
So he has no feet left.
Yes. So
frostbite.
Everyone's got some degree of frostbite, but Blackborough's got it the worst on his feet. And they're starting to get pretty bad.
Fido instead.
Yeah, Black Toe-O.
He's like Mr. Deeds, except both of them.
Yeah, so pretty bad. But by April 15th, they were finally on solid land. And then they immediately had to move to the other side of the island because it turns out that the place where they landed was at low tide. And as soon as high tide happened, they were going to be underwater. So then they moved to the other side of the island, and then they could finally rest. And Shackleton gave them permission to eat as much as they wanted from the rations. And everyone had a big old feast.
So this island, you said, was 100 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
What was the temperature difference?
Not much.
It was still really cold?
It was still very cold. It was still very cold. It was April too, so it was almost the winter time. It was not as cold. It wasn't like minus 30, but it was still hovering around freezing, you know?
Okay.
And snow and ice and everything were a big concern. So before long, they realized that they wouldn't be able to stay. There was nothing here and nobody was looking for them. But so many of the men were in really poor health that they wouldn't all be able to
hence the heart
get
attack.
Back into the boats. Yeah, hence the heart attack. So Shackleton decided after 10 days on the island, he was like, okay, we have to leave. We had like So I'm going to take one of the boats and 5 guys, and we're going to go. And we'll be back. I promise. So they set sail. Basically, they spent a couple of days adapting the James Caird for a long voyage. They added an extra sail to it. They made the sides higher. They stretched canvas over the top of it to try and get some semblance of waterproofing, like some vaguely waterproof area that they could be in. But ultimately, they're in a 20-foot boat that they're now going to try and sail to South Georgia Island, which, by the way, is 800 miles away.
That, and I assume like if you put a cover on it, you can keep heat in and not die.
And I think they were concerned about sleeping as well, having a place dry to sleep.
Yeah,
exactly. As a place to put the stove and everything like that. They did still have a lot of condensed powdered milk, and they were drinking a lot of hot milk when they had the chance to, which I think is funny.
Hot milk.
It gets you really sweepy. You just sweepy with the hot milk.
Oh, the hot milk make you so sweepy.
Yeah.
Hot milk just usually makes me crispy.
Mm-hmm. Usually crispy milk.
There you go. I was waiting for that. You guys were so close to it. I just needed to push you over the edge.
Give me the crispy milk.
Crispy boys.
God. Crispy milk.
It's basically just milk ice cubes because it's so cold. So it's just crispy
milk.
Gross. So, at this point, Shackleton took Chippy, and because they would need Chippy in case they needed to do any repairs to the ship. They took Wuzzles because he was the captain, the navigator. Jim Crean, who was another one of Shackleton's like no nonsense, like get stuff done guys. And then 2 of the sailors, John Vincent and Timothy McCarthy, who are 2 low-ranking kind of like sailor types who he didn't trust to not make nonsense back at camp. He was like, if I leave these guys behind, they're just going to slack off, so I'm going to take them with me.
Oh my God.
Plus, if you got to eat somebody, it's going to be one of those guys. Let's be real.
Yeah, for sure. So after they left, the men on Elephant Island who were left behind got fully into shelter mode. They're like, okay, we're here. We're going to be here. They're giving them until August. So this is the end of April. This is like April. I didn't write down.
Okay, if you're not back in 4 months.
Yeah, this is April 20 something.
Have they tried the radio?
The radio's long gone by this point.
Did they open it up and try to reverse the polarity or something?
They were basically like, it should take 2 weeks to get there. Let's give you 2 weeks back, and we'll give you an extra month for some, bonus time. Well, hopefully you'll be back by July, August, if everything goes wrong. So they go fully into shelter mode. They take the 2 boats that are left.
What was their plan in August?
That they were going to sail out and try again.
Woof.
They took the 2 boats that were left. They turned them upside down and made some walls out of rocks that they found and turned them into, and like used canvas to turn it into a hut where all 22 of them slept. So what did they nickname their hut?
The F Shack.
Is it Island Camp, the Snuggery, or Wuzzle's Folly?
I'm hoping the Snuggery, but probably Wuzzle's Folly.
It's Wuzzle Folly, isn't it? That's the one I
No, it was the Snuggery. Andrew was right.
Yay, Snuggly.
They called it the Snuggery, which is really cute. So they no longer had infinite penguins to eat, but they did occasionally get a seal or a penguin that they would be able to eat.
But they did have infinite snuggles.
Yeah, that's why they called it the Snuggeries, because they were all so close to each other. They held concerts on Saturdays, and they wrote songs. I have the lyrics to one of those songs if you're interested.
We're cold. Yes, we're cold. Here we are. Can't feel my feet.
My name is Frankie Wildo. My hut's on Elephant Isle.
Is this
the
a
walls
rap?
Without a single brick, the roofs without a tile. But nevertheless, you must confess for many and many a mile, it's the most palatial dwelling place you'll find on Elephant Isle.
He's more of a jig.
Can you rap that instead of jig it?
It's to the tune of a song called Solomon Levi, which I don't know. So
can you send me that? And before we upload this, I'll put a
we'll put a beat behind it. And
give
then,
me a funky beat, and I'll rap to it at the end.
Sure.
Thank you.
They still had the banjo, so that was helpful at least.
Thank God.
Yeah, they had wrapped it in waterproof cloth before taking the journey.
They're like, play dueling banjos. He like plays it, and they like runs to the other side of the room, and then he plays it, and they runs to the other side of the room.
So they basically spent most of the days trying to keep their spirits up while they, and snuggling. They kept a watch for a ship, but like by this point there was pack ice as far as they could see. They basically got there the last possible moment before it all started to freeze again.
Cool.
The biggest day that they had was Midwinter's Day on June 22nd, where they ate a ton of food because they're like, well, we need to keep our spirits up. And they had a big old supper.
Shackleton's not here to tell us no.
Yeah, exactly.
Was the belly bandit there, though?
Yeah, the belly bandit was there. And they all made
he
fun
didn't
of him
do his belly job that day.
Oh, his belly job.
I think because it was Midwinter's Day, he made an exception.
Oh, good.
At a point, they had run out of alcohol, and so they tried to make
sober.
They tried to make their own
prison wine
booze that they called Gut Rot 1916, which was a mixture of water, ginger, sugar, and methylated alcohol, which was the fuel for their stoves.
Did it work?
Horrible taste, wrote Macklin. It served only to turn most of us teetotalers for life, except for a few who pretended to like it. Several felt ill after.
This booze so bad you never want to drink again.
That's crazy.
They complained about how bad each other smelled in all their diaries, and they fought about who had to empty the piss can in the hut. It was basically, if you filled the piss can, you had to empty the piss can.
So whoever tops it off, drops it off?
Yeah, whoever tops it off, drops it off.
Nice.
And so they would hold it in until basically like who would be the last one to go, because nobody wanted to go outside.
Because they were all trying to let it mellow.
They would talk to each other about like what food they would eat when they finally got back to civilization. Most people were like, I want sweets. Give me them sweets. Nobody wanted to eat meat ever again. They were like, I don't ever want to eat any more meat.
I mean, that's all they've been eating this whole freaking time.
They were pretty much all constipated. They called it chronic coprostasis, which is great. But yeah, they were all just stopped up with seal and penguin meat from this basically entirely carnivorous diet. So they all wrote down what they wanted.
They were doing the keto diet.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But worse.
And they hated it.
Yeah.
They're like, I hope this doesn't become a fad one day.
God, I just want sugar. Fuck.
The guy who had the heart attack recovered, and eventually they had to amputate Blackborough's foot.
Oh, shit.
So it basically became gangrenous, and they had to cut his toes off. So they gave him the last remaining chloroform that the surgeon had with him, and sliced his foot off.
Choppy.
It took 55 minutes.
Why did they time it? That's so specific.
Well, you know.
What else do you do?
They're like, ready and go.
What is there to do besides time these sorts of things?
That tracks.
Yeah. He ended up recovering, and everyone took care of him and made sure that he was okay, even though he was an invalid at this point.
You can just pop those bad boys off like.
I know, right? Like they're frozen enough. You just whack it with a hammer hard enough and it'll break.
Oh, and then this is the quote that I meant to read earlier, is about the food. We want to be fed with a large wooden spoon and, like babies, be patted on the stomach with the back of the spoon so as to get in a little more than would otherwise be the case. In short, we want to be overfed, grossly overfed, yes, very grossly overfed on nothing but porridge and sugar, black currant and apple pudding and cream, cake, milk, eggs, jam, honey, and bread and butter till we burst, and we'll shoot the man who offers us meat. We don't want to see or hear of any more meat as long as we live. And the belly burglar wrote that in his diary.
Damn.
I want all of the cakes in the world, and then I'm going to poop for 6 days.
I want someone to hit me on the belly with the back of a spoon.
Make some more room.
Which he said that like they do with babies. I have never hit a baby with a spoon before.
Yeah, I don't know. Then the last thing I'll say that they did, this is my favorite, funniest thing I think that happened, is that they all ran out of tobacco except for Wordy, who was the geologist. He was very rationing of his tobacco, and once everyone else ran out, they would all try and bribe him with cool rocks that they found to share tobacco.
Isn't that what penguins do when they try to like mate for life?
Well, you eat much.
Did they learn that from the penguins?
If you eat a lot of penguins, you slowly become a penguin. Everyone knows that.
I've known a lot of geologists, and this just makes so much sense.
It tracks.
Yeah, it tracks hard.
It's ridiculous. Like I guarantee you the entire time he's like, get out of here. And then there had to be one.
Yeah, right.
That he was like, oh, fuck, that's real. Like, that's a geode or some shit. Like, oh,
yeah, I found some quartz. No, you didn't.
Don't tell anybody we found this.
Okay, fine. You can have half of a cigarette.
Made with the rocks that everyone else tried to give me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at one point one of them who didn't like smoking a pipe brought rolling papers with him, and at one point he had torn pages out of a Bible and like shoved them in his pocket and was using those as rolling papers.
Take that,
That's
God.
Hardcore. Yeah. Suck it.
So back to the James Caird, back to Shackleton and crew. They did eventually make it to South Georgia Island. It took them 2 weeks. They sighted the island after fast. 2 weeks at sea. And it was it's just fucked up the way that the description of this trip, because they're still in the Drake Passage basically. And at one point they had like an anchor, like a sea anchor that they would drop at night so that they could like try and sleep while like one person was making sure they didn't go off course. But eventually the sea anchor froze and broke. And so they pretty much at that point they couldn't stop. And so they had to be moving constantly. And once they sighted the island, it took them 2 more days to actually make it on land because the wind and waves were so strong.
Dude, Wuzzles is great at his job.
Dude,
Wuzzles is amazing that 800 miles. If they were off course at all, they were completely screwed, and they hit it right dead on the money.
That's 2 weeks too. That seems quick considering the last year of their lives.
Right? 2 weeks in that, scary. The thing that sucks about this is that the place where they needed to go, the whaling camp where they would actually be able to see anyone, was on the other side of the island. And they were like, we can sail up, and they wouldn't be able to sail around because the wind was all wrong. So they had to go over the island, Jesus. Which, by the way, was a mountain and glaciers. It was just mountainous and glaciers. And it was pretty much unheard of for people to cross it. But they were so determined. They were like, we can't get this far and then not make it. They climbed over the glaciers after spending a couple days recovering. And no map of what it was. They were just improvising their path. And at one point, they had to like go straight down like 900 feet. But they made it to the whaling camp on May 21st.
How long did it take them to cross the island?
It took them 3 days.
That's not terrible.
I could have done it in half.
Half a day?
Yeah.
Do you think all the people at the whaling camp were like sitting out there like looking at the ocean? Because, you know, no one's going to be coming up from behind you. And then Shackleton just like tapped him on the shoulder. Oh, hey, friends.
Oh, dude. They smelled them 3 days ago.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, basically, he showed up at the camp and went to go talk to the person who like they had last talked to, like the head of the camp. And he's like, we thought you were dead.
We're like, is that you under all that year of beard?
Yeah. So he got in touch with this guy.
Grease.
And then pretty much immediately, like they slept the night, and then immediately it was like, we have to get back to Elephant Island. We have to rescue everyone. And now this is May. The people back on Elephant Island, remember I told you that they celebrated Midwinter's Day in June. They made 3 attempts to make it to Elephant Island. And it was only on the 3rd attempt that they actually made it there. The first one, the ship wasn't worthy. Like it was just too much ice. The second one, too much ice. And then finally they made it there on August 30th.
Damn, one day. And they would have been like, all right, guys, wrap it up.
So August
tear down
30th, the
snuggle camp. We're snuggling at sea.
The snuggery's no more.
The snuggery's no more.
It's now the Snugger Sea.
Hey.
The Endurance became frozen in the ice in January 1915. They were rescued on August 30th, 1916. So they spent a year and a half after the ship was frozen in the ice before they were rescued.
That is a long time.
And nobody died.
And that's crazy too.
Not a single person died.
That's crazy.
That's I think the most amazing part of all of this. The worst thing that happened is that the guy who was a stowaway had his foot removed. So like, smart job there stowing away. But this is the complete opposite of the Essex, just in that everyone lived. Like, I mean, except for the dogs, which is like really sad. But just the fact that these 28 men were stuck in the ice for a year and a half and none of them died. Completely astonishing to me.
The dogs could have made it.
I don't think that the dogs would have fit into the boats.
Disagree.
Okay. So turns out that while they were out of contact from the rest of the world, World War I started.
So they got back to as soon as they stepped back in England, they're like, here's a rifle, go.
Pretty much. And there was basically no fanfare to their return because World War I was in the middle of happening.
They're like, yay, we're back. Why is everyone so sad? World War I is fresh and ready.
Just like a Little Caesar's pizza.
Yeah, so they walk back into they walk back and they're like, oh, we're back in England. Hey, where's the spoon? And then they're like, yeah, nope, here's a gun.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to eat my body weight in sugar.
Yeah, they're like, we had to ration for the war.
And isn't it that Ernest Shackleton, when he came back, people were like, actually, what you did is really irresponsible because we need all these men for the war effort, and you're out there just traipsing around in Antarctica, letting people get their feet cut off.
Now that I didn't hear, but I could see it being a thing. He didn't get back to England until like 1917 because he pretty much they went from being rescued back to South Georgia Island, and then they all went to Valparaiso in Chile, I think. And Shackleton pretty much went directly from that into like a tour of America. And it wasn't until after he did like a publicity tour in America that he made it back to England. A lot of the guys ended up enlisting in the Navy and serving in the war effort in some way or another. I mean, I think the first one to die after was killed in World War I, not too long afterwards.
That's gotta suck.
Yeah, right? Yeah, immediate. Tim McCarthy and Alfred Cheatham had been killed in action, and Ernest Wild, who was Frank's younger brother and a member of the Ross Sea Party, had died of typhoid while serving in the Mediterranean. So the Ross Sea Party also didn't really do so hot. They did manage to lay all of the supply caches that they were going to, but 2 of them died of scurvy in the process. They didn't lose the ship, however, so that's kind of helpful. But it didn't go super well for them.
They did get stuck in an ice floe.
Still there?
They did get stuck in an ice floe, but at least their ship didn't get crushed.
So when did they drop? They dropped off the supplies on the other side of Antarctica.
Yeah. So as far as I know, those are still there.
We can get them. Are we doing this? We can do this. I know what kind of ship we need to bring.
Let's do it.
I listened to Zach's story.
There's a lot of people in Antarctica now. Well, like not all the time. And I think they're pretty much just in like the research stations. But Shackleton died a couple of years later. He had a heart attack. He was basically like, I'm going right back to Antarctica. And he ended up bringing a few of those guys on another trip to Antarctica in 1921.
Fool me once.
After he did.
Well, he never
did
actually
do some war
got
stuff.
there.
But no, the ship was docked at South Georgia, and he died of a heart attack on January 5th, 1922.
So he didn't even get a chance to get it back.
No, he didn't even get a chance to try again.
A couple times.
The photographer ended up getting a lot of notoriety from his photographs. You can actually find a lot of the negatives have been scanned and are available online. I think the Australian National Library has most of them. While I've been writing my notes for this, I've had his pictures as my background on my monitors and my desktop background. It's been pretty cool. There's a lot of really great photos, including one of Mrs. Chippy. And so speaking of Chippy, he went back to New Zealand this entire time. He has been a Kiwi, which I did not mention, but he's from New Zealand. And he was working in like the ship docks and stuff like that in New Zealand until he had an injury, which meant he couldn't work anymore. And sadly, he ended up dying destitute. But he was buried in an unmarked grave, but with full naval honors. There was like an honor, like he had a funeral, but the grave was unmarked until what year was it? 1959. The New Zealand Antarctic Society erected a headstone for him.
Why did they do that before? Like they just...
he didn't have the money to do it. The New Zealand Antarctic Society, I don't think it existed yet.
They're like, hey, let's celebrate him. Throw him in the hole. See you later.
Yeah. Now, most importantly, in 2004, the New Zealand Antarctic Society raised money to get a statue of Mrs. Chippy added to his grave.
Perfect.
His family said that basically until the day he died, he did not forgive Shackleton for having his cat killed. And he talked about that cat like every day until he died.
You survived.
If you couldn't tell from all this, Chippy was my favorite. Oh, and everybody except for 4 of them got the polar medal for the expedition. Chippy didn't get one because he did the insubordination on the ice. Did I mention?
No.
Wait, did I mention the insubordination on the ice?
I think you skipped over the insubordination.
What?
Oh, after the ship sank, he was sad that his cat got shot, and he basically was like, all right, the ship is sank. You are no longer our leader. I'm sitting down on the ice and I'm not doing any more of this. You don't have authority over me. And then Shackleton was like, actually, I do, because of like this contract and something else, and wouldn't let him insubordinate. And eventually he fell back in line. And so because of that, he did not get a polar medal.
Boo hiss.
And then 3 of the lowest ranking sailors also didn't get a polar medal for like unknown reasons. He never said why. They just didn't give it. I think maybe because of their conduct. One of them was like sick the whole time.
That's not a reason to strip someone of a medal.
He was still there.
I mean, what did he do though? He was super using his sick days.
He's like, they just farted too much, and he's like, ew, no medal.
And one of the ship's surgeon was later on record as saying that he thought the withholding of the medal was a bit harsh. He said they were perhaps not very endearing characters, but they never let the expedition down.
Yeah.
Shackleton's like, they're annoying and I hate them and they're stinky.
Yeah,
gross.
they're fugly sluts.
And then all of this ends with last year, the shipwreck was found.
Yes, that's what I knew about this. I was waiting for that moment because I remember I watched a video about it and it was fucking crazy.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was the second try that they had to make because the Weddell Sea is fucking nuts.
But didn't they say that the navigator guy like fucking nailed it?
Yeah, he knew exactly where to look.
He was the ship was 4 miles off of where he said it was.
That's fucking crazy good for,
he was able to like perfectly predict where it was, and it was 3,000 meters below the sea.
Oh my god.
It's a deep wreck.
Deep motherfucker.
And so because the sea is too cold, there are no like wood eating organisms that live that far down and that cold. So it's perfectly preserved. So like all the
video
wood
on YouTube is fucking amazing.
Beautiful. So yeah, look that up. It's really cool. They scanned it for like future study, but they don't intend to disturb the wreck. They want to leave it.
Well, it would get demolished if they tried to lift it up.
Oh yeah.
Should we try to go get it?
I think, are we doing this?
I think we're doing this. Oh my god.
I mean, there's already supplies out there. We could just pick those up on the way.
On the other side of the continent.
We'll find a way. We have cars now.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're out there, we'll get Ash some penguins to try.
Yeah, and Ash can eat some penguins.
So, listeners, if you hear this, send us $10.5 million.
Justin's family, send us $10.5 million. I know you're listening.
Yeah,
and we'll bring you back penguins.
And we'll bring you back some penguin meat, and that's it.
All right. So, I know that I think I know what everyone's least favorite thing they learned this episode was, but what was everyone's most favorite thing that they learned this episode?
When they put down all the animals.
I like that they kept their spirits up and they sang songs to each other and they put on plays and stuff. I also just really enjoy the snuggery.
The snuggery.
My favorite thing was the stupid fucking nicknames.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I loved them. Mr. Belly... The belly burglar? I mean, come on. Are you fucking kidding me? That's so good. I'm going to write a children's story about that. It's perfect. And then obviously the thing I didn't like the most was them surviving after what they did to the puppies.
After what they did to those poor puppies.
And the kitty.
I think it is hilarious that Ernest Shackleton is known as an Antarctic explorer when he never set foot on Antarctica.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to say for the way that he was able to keep everyone alive. But also just the fact that, yeah, he never actually made it.
That's like calling me a college student when I never stepped foot in a college.
And that's what he gets for doing what he did to those dogs. And Mrs. Chippy.
And
Justice for Miss Chippy.
Mrs. Chippy. Justice for
Mrs. Chippy.
Straight up. Yeah.
I think that should be the rallying call of this podcast is justice for Mrs. Chippy. I'm putting that in the episode description.
Well, don't, because it's a spoiler.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
Okay, well, hey. I'm taking over now. Thanks for listening to Zach's very long episode that took almost as long as the expedition itself. Thank you, Zach. That was a great episode. Honestly, it went very fast because it was a riveting tale. So I
had to pee in the middle of it, and I was very hydrated. Just to let you guys know, very hydrated.
I'm glad to hear that you were. I'm glad to hear that you were hydrated.
That was the highlight of Bo's day.
It's important.
Hydrated. So thank you for listening. We're gonna get out of here. So if you want more content, go ahead and pop over to the Instagram at GetDumpedOnPod. Leave us a comment, please. And tell us your favorite thing about the story and why also you hope they all died because they killed puppies and stuff. And if you'd like to send us an email for booking reasons or whatever else you would want, it is getdumpedonpodcast@gmail.com. Other than that, we do have a subreddit. I still haven't posted on it. I promise I will do that. In the meantime, we will see you next week. We have a special guest next week as well, but we're not going to say who it is. See you later.
It's my twin.
Bye-bye.
Ash and Zach are super smart. They went to college and learned a bunch of stuff. And Bo and Andrew didn't go to college because that's just the way life goes sometimes. What happens when you put them together and you try to make them learn? Grab your friends, let's listen together on Get Dumped On an Info Dump Podcast. Hey guys, Andrew here. It takes a really long time to edit these episodes, and I edit every single one, especially these long ones. They take a very, very long time because I look through literally everything to make sure they're perfect. So to get back at Zach for taking this long of an episode and making me edit this for the last 3 hours, here's every single time that he said the word in this podcast. I took it out, so you did not hear it previously. From beginning to end, this is every time he said from the very beginning to the very end. Enjoy. Thanks, Zach. Love you. Thanks, guys. See you next week. Andrew out.